Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm Brent Bergherm, your host for this channel, and what we're going to look at today is something about printing, something that confuses us a lot, and I want to do what I can to maybe hopefully take a little bit of that confusion away and just help us wrap our minds around what's happening with all this color, with all these different definitions of color and what's going on like that and whatnot. So this video does assume you are familiar with color spaces, the idea between sRGB and Adobe RGB, and then what we do with printing when we go to assign a profile for a paper. Whether you're using a Canon printer, Epson printer, doesn't matter. As long as you have that profile loaded, you're good to go. And then, of course, our ProPhoto RGB color space. So all those different color spaces and how big they are and whatnot. But if you aren't exactly familiar with those, take a look at this quick graphic that I'm going to put up on screen for you. That is just a quick graphical idea that says, here's where the visual human system can look at things and understand things, and you know where you're at. And then these different diagrams, these different triangles for these different color spaces, those are all about where they fall on that diagram. And it's just, I want to use this really as a representation so we can just understand ProPhoto is the largest. It encapsulates colors that you can't even see. I should say it defines colors that you can't even see, so that you can include a whole boatload of other colors that we can see, but then we just keep kind of going in. And then you can see the smallest of the standard ones that we use is the sRGB. And so let's turn now to Photoshop, and we're going to look at all these things in real life, and let's do that now. This certainly was a fun thing to shoot, a fun thing to process. This is what I call my print master. So we can see I've got the PM up here, and that's how I define what my print master is. And a couple things to quickly look at. What we're dealing with on this image, I just wanted to do this item. So it says the source color space is ProPhoto, and we're going to stay in that color space for this video. It's just that I wanted to make sure you guys understood we are definitely in ProPhoto right now. Now, as far as the color space that I'm able to preview on my screen, that is certainly a different color space, so it has to do some translation so I can see and I can represent what I have here. It is a calibrated screen. Obviously, as we compress the video and we go through the YouTube and Vimeo and whatever else to get to you, there's some other challenges that we're dealing with in keeping the color accurate. But what I'm going to show you is actually about color proofing, and it has to do with our ability to proof colors and then how we're going to see what's going on with the color gamut warning. So with our proofing setup, what we're going to look at here is let's simulate one of these different items. First off, we're going to just simulate ProPhoto. And so when I tell it to simulate ProPhoto, nothing changed. And when I do the gamut warning, certainly there's no gamut warnings because everything is enclosed within that color space, and there's just nothing outside of that color space. That's the largest color space ever, and it's already defined that color space, so I knew there would not be any problems here. Let's go back to the setup, and now this is where we're going to dive into some of these other challenging areas. So in our setup, let's take a look at this sRGB, and then we're also going to take a look at a few other items. I want to go to sRGB because that is the most restrictive color space, and so you can see because I still have that gamut warning turned on, all of these gray elements, largely it's all in the blue in that ocean area, those are the areas that are out of gamut. It is not defined. That color needs to be translated when we go from that ProPhoto and then we go into the sRGB color space. So what can we learn from that? Well, our basic monitors, most of them, if you don't have a really cool monitor or a really expensive monitor, what do you want to call it, that shows the Adobe RGB color space, then this is very a close proximity of what you're also going to be able to see and interpret on your screen. That is, these blues are out of gamut. Let's take a quick gander at the Adobe RGB color space. So when I come up here to Adobe RGB 1998, there we are. That includes a whole lot more of those blues, and there's still a few of them that are just a little bit out of Gamut. We can understand with what we're looking at here on this Gamut warning, there's just so many of them now comparatively that are within the color space. And so if we can print to a paper, we can print to a something that is at least Adobe RGB, we know that the color that is in the file is going to come through and is going to print accurately. But that brings us back to another challenge. When we have the idea of what we can see on our screen versus the color we know is available in the file, our screen is not going to show us that accurate representation of what's in the file. And then when we go and print and the color is off from what we see on screen, we're all like, well, that sucks. It's not what I saw on screen. Well, I just want to give you an idea. Maybe it's better than what you saw on screen because you have colors that are there that are simply not capable of being shown on screen. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. But if you wanted to have that absolute parity, take everything down to that sRGB, and then you're pretty much guaranteed to have parity between what you're seeing on screen and what you're going to get on print, because that's the most restrictive color space, and you'll be able to pretty well match exactly what you're looking for here on screen versus what you're going to get on print. So let's take a look again now at some other items. Here we have the P3. That is the color space that my MacBook Pro is on. So if I were to do P3, that's pretty much the same, in this image anyway, that's pretty much the same as the sRGB. As we go back to sRGB, we can see it chokes in a lot more. All right, the money shot is all about what happens when we're looking at this preview with what those paper profiles can do for us. And you can see I've got a boatload of paper profiles and I've gone way too far down the line here. But another thing I can do, right now I'm looking at my right hand screen. So this is my Dell monitor that I'm previewing it on, and I calibrated this just over a month ago now. And let's take a look at this. So right now I've got sRGB. Let's see if it expands or contracts any in that blue area compared to what I'm able to see actually on this screen. It contracted a little bit, so that really stinks. sRGB is even bigger than my monitor, so I have even a greater challenge for what I have here at this particular screen. I have an even greater challenge because it contracted just a little bit. And in one sense, that's a little disappointing, and I'm like, oh, I need to get a new screen. Because look what happened here in the rooftops as well. I lost some of the rooftop values where when I'm in the sRGB, I do have those rooftop values. So I just cannot see. I have to understand this color that I am physically seeing with my eyes right now is not a perfectly accurate representation of what is actually in the file. So when I print and I compare to screen, I just have to understand I'm going to have differences. And so really, what I really want to encourage you to say is the print is probably should be your gold standard in this. If you have differences, probably that's a good thing. And obviously, if it comes out and we still don't like it, we need to make shifts around with the color and do whatever else. But maybe that's a good thing. And so our print is actually much more capable here. Let's do one final thing. And I'm going to find my favorite paper, the Canson Infinity Barrière Photographique. Now, this happens to be on my Epson up at work, and then this is my Pixma Pro 10 here in my home office. So let's take a look at the Pixma Pro 10 on that paper and see if there's any differences between these two printers. Whoa, everything is included, every color is included on that paper. So whatever is in the photo, I'm not getting any warnings that when I translate to the printer, I am losing any color. And this right here is the exact reason why I like to end up after you learn how the whole process goes and you gain confidence in the process. I like to see everyone moving towards that pro photo editing space, because this allows you to just keep every single color hopefully as accurately as possible, of course. It's just we can't see it until it gets to the printing stage. What would have happened if I had translated that to the sRGB right away? Those colors that are there that are actually in the print would not be able to be printed simply because they're outside the sRGB color space, but they would match my screen. I'm just saying we need to get ourselves to the point to where we just we need to shift what our gold standard is. What is quote unquote quality? What is the best result? I'm saying we can probably get the best result if we trust what's in the print and we judge that for it, because it is a totally separate medium. Yes, it will not match our screens all the time. That's okay. All right, so let's compare this. Are there any differences between printers? So this printer, the 4900 that I have, the Epson, is a bit of an older printer, but it still has like, what, 10 inks or something like that. And so let's take a quick gander and see if there's any differences. There really isn't any differences between these two printers with that single paper. So I hope that helps you wrap your mind more around these color spaces and what it is we're actually going to see on print versus what we see on the computer screen. And yes, we have differences. Mostly, that is the big difference between simply what our screens are even capable of doing and what our screens are even capable of seeing. It would be good to try and do this with a profile. Let me see if I can do that really quickly. Actually, I do have a different screen up at work, and I have a different profile for my notebook computer. So let's take a quick gander at that, and we can compare those two those items with my Dell screen here. So on this one with my notebook computer, let's take a look in the computer again. There's my notebook computer, and then here's the Dell again. I'm looking at the right-hand screen. So the Dell is just really chopped in. It's just terrible compared to even my computer screen on my notebook. So my notebook screen is much better quality. As we wrap it up, it's just about understanding again that whole idea. What are we looking at? Do we understand what we're able to get out of our screens? And sometimes it's actually the screen that's limiting us. It's not the print that's limiting us. So when we don't have that exact parity between screen and print, I guess what I'm saying is, for me and my prints, I'm not looking for that exact match. I'm looking for something that's accurate and something that's really close. But if I get better color coming out of that printer, which I probably am, then that's awesome and that's great. And I'm really pleased to have that, because that's capturing the color and reproducing, I should say, the color that I captured on site, that I'm able to process and keep in Lightroom as I move through Photoshop. It's just that screen is saying, it's doing its best, but it's not a very good screen. I really need a much better screen. But as we saw, even with the Adobe RGB, if I had a screen that did that, I still wouldn't be able to see all the colors that are available. And it's just the knowledge now that you have that knowledge, you have a much better understanding of what you're going to get, and your expectations are probably better aligned with what you're able to get and what you're really seeing out of that printer. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate your time, and until next time, happy shooting.